My name is Emily. I am 21 years old. For my entire life, I believed I was a burden. I believed I was a problem that someone else was generous enough to solve. I am going to tell you the exact truth about the woman who raised me, how she treated me, and how a single slap at a birthday party unraveled a 21-year-old crime. I grew up in a large, comfortable house in Fairfax, Virginia. It was a nice neighborhood with green lawns, wide driveways, and quiet streets. But my life inside that house was very different from what the neighbors saw. I did not have a normal bedroom. Since I was a little girl, I slept in the furnace storage room in the unfinished part of the basement. It was a small, dusty space that always smelled like heating oil and old cardboard. My bed was a stained twin mattress that Diane, the woman I was told to call my mother, had found on the curb in a different neighborhood. She dragged it into the basement and told me I was lucky to have my own space. I did not have a dresser. I kept my few clothes in plastic grocery bags on the concrete floor. In the winter, the furnace would roar to life right next to my head, making it impossible to sleep. In the summer, the room was damp and suffocating. I started earning my keep early. When I turned 11 years old, Diane made it clear that I had to contribute to the household if I wanted to stay. From that year on, I cooked dinner for the family every single night. I was a child standing on a step stool to reach the stove, boiling pasta and frying chicken while the rest of the family watched television upstairs. I also did the laundry for all four people in the house: Diane, her husband Mark, their biological daughter Ashley, and myself. I spent hours sorting their expensive clothes, making sure not to ruin Diane's blouses or shrink Ashley's sweaters. On weekends, my job was to clean the bathrooms. The worst part was cleaning Ashley's private ensuite bathroom. She was a year older than me, but she treated me like a maid. She would purposely leave wet towels on the floor and toothpaste in the sink, knowing I would be the one scrubbing it clean. I never received an allowance for any of this work. Whenever I asked for a few dollars to buy a snack at school, Diane would look at me with disgust and tell me how much money she was already wasting by keeping me fed. Ashley, on the other hand, lived a completely different life. When she turned 16, Diane and Mark bought her a brand new Jeep. They paid expensive tuition for her to attend a private prep school. She went on lavish vacations with her friends, wore designer clothes, and received expensive coaching to prepare her for college sorority life. I went to the local public school. I wore Ashley's discarded, worn-out clothes. When I turned 16, I was not given a car. I was given a curfew and a job at a local diner. Because I had no vehicle and no access to my own identification documents, Diane kept them locked in a safe, claiming I was too irresponsible to hold them. I had to walk 2 miles to work every day. I walked in the rain, the snow, and the summer heat. I gave Diane half of my paychecks because she said I needed to pay rent for the basement room. I secretly saved the other half in a small metal box hidden inside the drop ceiling of the furnace room. I did not know it at the time, but the money paying for Ashley's private school tuition, her Jeep, and her designer clothes was not coming from Mark's job or Diane's savings. It was my money. But I would not discover that dark truth until much later. Despite all the unequal treatment, I spent my childhood desperately trying to earn Diane's love. I thought if I just worked harder, cooked better meals, and stayed out of her way, she would eventually look at me the way she looked at Ashley. I wanted a mother. I wanted a family. That desperate need for approval led to the biggest mistake of my life, which took place on Diane's 52nd birthday. For months, I had been saving every spare dollar from my diner tips. I wanted to buy Diane something nice, something that would prove I appreciated her taking me in. I walked to a high-end department store and spent $150 on a beautiful, genuine leather wallet. It was wrapped in thick, expensive paper and tied with a gold ribbon. I was so proud of it. I thought it would be the gift that finally made her smile at me. Diane decided to throw a massive birthday party for herself in our Fairfax backyard. She invited 40 guests, including neighbors, her friends from the country club, and Mark's coworkers. The backyard was decorated with string lights. A cater buffet was set up on the patio, and a bartender was pouring expensive champagne. I was not allowed to mingle. I spent the first 2 hours of the party in the kitchen, washing the preparation dishes and making sure the trash cans were emptied. Finally, it was time for the gifts. Everyone gathered around the patio table. Diane sat in a wicker chair, holding a glass of champagne, glowing under the attention of her 40 guests. Ashley went first. She handed Diane a sleek, heavy box. Diane tore it open and gasped. It was an Apple Watch Ultra. The guests clapped and cheered as Diane hugged Ashley tightly, kissing her cheek. "Oh, my perfect girl," Diane said loudly. "You always know exactly what I want." I stood at the back of the crowd, my hands shaking. I held my small, wrapped box. I stepped forward. The guests parted slightly to let me through. Some of the neighbors gave me pitying looks. They all knew I was the foster kid Diane had generously taken in, though nobody knew the details. I handed the box to Diane. "Happy birthday," I said quietly. Diane looked at the box, then looked at me. She didn't smile. She set her champagne glass down and slowly untied the gold ribbon. She ripped the paper off and opened the box. She pulled out the leather wallet. For a few seconds, there was complete silence in the backyard. The guests watched her face, waiting for her reaction. Then, Diane laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. She held the wallet up by its corner, as if it were a piece of garbage. "You really think this repays 21 years?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. My face burned. I felt the eyes of 40 people staring at me. I swallowed hard and whispered, "I saved for months." Diane's expression hardened. She dropped the wallet onto the table. "This is what my foster check buys me," she said loudly, making sure every single guest heard her. The guests froze. The comfortable chatter completely died. A woman in the front row, our next-door neighbor, shifted uncomfortably and murmured, "Diane, that's a bit harsh, don't you think?" Diane ignored her. She stood up from her chair, towering over me. The champagne was definitely in her system, removing whatever filter she normally had in public. "I should have left you in foster care," she said, her voice rising. A few people gasped. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred with tears. I stood completely still, unable to process the cruelty of what was happening. Then she slapped me. It wasn't a light tap. She swung her hand and hit me hard across the left side of my face. The force of it knocked me off balance. I stumbled backward, crashing into a small side table holding empty glasses. The glass shattered violently across the stone patio. I fell to my knees, holding my stinging cheek. My ears were ringing. The entire backyard was dead silent, except for the sound of my ragged breathing. Diane stood above me, glaring down with absolute hatred. She didn't apologize. She didn't look embarrassed. She simply delivered her final, devastating line. "You were never mine anyway," she spat. "She's not my daughter." That public rejection, in front of everyone we knew, broke something inside me. It snapped the last string of hope I had been holding onto for 21 years. That was the last time my foster mother ever touched me. 3 hours after the party, I was walking down the dark shoulder of Route 50, crying. I had gone down to the basement, grabbed a black plastic trash bag, and shoved my few clothes inside. I reached into the drop ceiling above the furnace, took my small metal box of diner tips, and walked out the back door. I did not say goodbye to anyone. My left cheek still throbbed and burned from where Diane had slapped me. The tears mixed with the dirt on my face, making my skin feel tight and cold. The night air was freezing, and cars rushed past me, their headlights blinding me for a second before leaving me in the dark again. I had no destination. I just knew I could not spend another night in that furnace storage room. I had walked for about 2 miles when a large vehicle slowed down behind me. It was a black SUV, an Escalade. It pulled onto the shoulder of the road right in front of me, its hazard lights blinking. My heart hammered in my chest. I gripped my trash bag tightly, ready to run into the ditch if I had to. The passenger side window remained rolled up, and I couldn't see inside through the tinted glass. Then, the engine cut off, and the driver's side door opened. A woman stepped out of the black SUV. She was tall, wearing a long dark coat, and she walked quickly around the front of the car toward me. I backed away, raising my free hand defensively. She stopped a few feet away from me. The streetlights overhead illuminated her face. I froze completely. I stopped breathing. I was looking at an older version of myself. We shared the exact same identical eyes. We had the same nose, the same jawline, and the same dark hair. I had never seen anyone who looked like me in my entire life. The woman looked at the red handprint still visible on my cheek. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. She took a slow step forward and spoke softly. "Emily, I'm your real mother," she said. I shook my head. My brain could not process what was happening. Diane had always told me my mother was a drug addict who dumped me at a fire station. She told me nobody wanted me. "No," I stammered, backing away again. "That's not true. I was abandoned." The woman shook her head fiercely. "You weren't abandoned," she said, her voice shaking with intense emotion. "You were stolen." Her name was Laura Bennett. She gently coaxed me into the passenger seat of her Escalade. The inside of the car was warm, and it smelled like vanilla and clean leather. I sat there holding my trash bag on my lap, shivering, while she turned the heater up. She didn't try to hug me or force any physical contact, which I appreciated. She just sat in the driver's seat, looking at me with a mixture of overwhelming relief and deep, painful sadness. She told me she had been looking for me for years. She explained that she hadn't just found me walking on the highway by coincidence. She knew I was going to leave that house tonight. She had hired private investigators to track down the adoption records that were supposed to be permanently sealed. For the past few months, she had been parking in different spots around my neighborhood, watching the Carter house for hours at a time. "I watched you," Laura explained, her voice thick with guilt and anger. "I saw you out in the front yard, mowing that massive lawn in the summer heat while the rest of them sat comfortably on the porch. I saw Diane yelling at you in the driveway when you didn't carry the heavy groceries inside fast enough. I even snuck into the backyard one night to look through the basement window. I saw you sleeping in the doorway of that storage room." I felt a flush of extreme embarrassment. I didn't like the idea of anyone seeing how pathetic my life was, how I lived like a servant in my own home. But Laura didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with a fierce, protective fury directed entirely at Diane. "Why didn't you come to the front door?" I asked her, my voice barely a whisper. "If you knew I was there, why didn't you knock?" "Because Diane legally adopted you, and she had expensive lawyers," Laura said clearly. "If I just showed up and caused a scene, she would have called the police and had me arrested for trespassing. She would have moved you somewhere else. I needed absolute, undeniable proof of what she did to me and what she was doing to you before I made my move. I needed to make sure when I came for you, she could never, ever take you back." Laura reached out and gently rested her hand on the center console. She looked over at me again, her eyes locking onto mine. "When I saw you outside that house for the first time, I didn't even need the private investigator's files to confirm it," Laura said, her voice dropping to a definitive whisper. "I knew it was you. You have my face." I sat back against the leather seat, staring at this woman. For 21 years, I had believed I was a burden, a discarded piece of trash that Diane had generously taken in out of the kindness of her heart. But sitting in this warm car, listening to Laura, the foundation of my entire life began to crack. Laura was about to explain the true story of how I ended up in Diane's house, and it was a story of pure betrayal, greed, and a massive financial crime. Laura drove us away from the dark highway and pulled into the brightly lit parking lot of a 24-hour diner. We did not go inside. We just sat in the warm SUV. She reached into the back seat and grabbed a thick, heavy manila folder. She placed it on her lap and took a deep breath. She told me the truth about the first year of my life. 21 years ago, Laura was a single mother. She was driving home from work one night when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car directly on the driver's side. The crash was catastrophic. Laura suffered massive head trauma and fell into a deep coma. She remained in that coma for 6 months. I was only a few months old at the time. The hospital's social workers needed to place me with family. Diane was Laura's cousin. She lived nearby. She was married to Mark, and she already had a baby girl named Ashley. Diane volunteered to step in as my temporary caregiver. But Diane did not want to be a temporary caregiver. While my real mother was lying in a hospital bed attached to a ventilator, fighting for her life, Diane went to court. She filed official abandonment papers against Laura. Diane forged Laura's signature on a legal relinquishment document. She told the court that Laura was a drug addict who had abandoned me at a fire station. Because Laura was unconscious and could not defend herself, the court approved the paperwork. Diane officially adopted me. She sealed the adoption records permanently so nobody could ever undo what she had done. When Laura finally woke up from her coma, she had to undergo months of intense physical therapy just to learn how to walk and talk again. The first thing she did when she was physically able was go to Diane's house to get me back. But Diane completely denied her access. Diane threatened to call the police and have Laura arrested if she ever came near the property. Because the adoption was finalized and closed, Laura had absolutely no legal rights to me anymore. The system recognized Diane as my sole legal mother. I sat in the car trying to absorb this. I asked Laura why Diane would do such a cruel thing. Diane hated me. She made me sleep in a furnace room and cook her meals. She openly favored her biological daughter. Why would she go through the immense legal trouble of stealing a baby she did not even want? Laura opened the manila folder. Because you are an income stream, she said flatly. She handed me a stack of papers. They were financial documents and banking ledgers her private investigator, a woman named Rachel, had managed to uncover. Laura pointed to a line item on the top page. It was a document from the Virginia Adoption Assistance Program. Because I was legally classified as a foster child rescued from a drug-addicted mother, Diane qualified for a state subsidy. The state of Virginia paid Diane a monthly stipend to help cover the costs of raising me. The amount was exactly $1,020 every single month. Diane had been collecting that check for 21 years. Laura did the math for me. Over the course of my life in that house, Diane had collected $257,040 from the state government just for keeping me under her roof. But that was not the worst part. Rachel's financial ledgers showed exactly where that money went. Laura showed me Diane's bank account deposits and withdrawals. I looked at the dates. Every month, the $1,020 state subsidy hit Diane's checking account. On those exact same dates, Diane made massive tuition payments to Ashley's expensive private school. I looked at the month Ashley turned 16. The subsidy hit the account, and 3 days later, Diane used it to make the down payment on Ashley's brand new Jeep. I looked at the summer months. The state money paid for the expensive beach vacations that I was never allowed to go on. It paid for Ashley's designer clothes. I sat there staring at the numbers. The realization hit me so hard I felt physically sick. I funded my sister's luxurious life. The money that was supposed to feed me, clothe me, and give me a normal bedroom was instead used to elevate Ashley. I was the sole financial reason Ashley got to live like a princess, while I slept on a dirty mattress in the basement and handed over my diner tips to pay rent. We also found an email printout in the folder where Diane explicitly told Mark, "We can't lose her subsidy," proving her entire motive was financial. While Laura and I were sitting in that diner parking lot uncovering 21 years of financial fraud, total chaos was erupting back at the Carter house. I found out later exactly how Diane reacted when she realized I was gone. When the birthday party ended and the guests went home, Diane noticed my trash bag of clothes was missing. She panicked. She did not panic because she missed me or cared about my safety. She panicked because her massive secret was suddenly walking around in the real world without her control. Diane immediately called the police. She tried to file a missing persons report. She told the dispatcher that I was highly unstable and had run away. She claimed I was mentally impaired and had easily been manipulated by someone into leaving the house. She wanted the police to find me and physically drag me back to her basement. But the police asked for my date of birth. When Diane gave it to them, the officer on the phone simply told her that I was a legal adult. They confirmed they could not force a 21-year-old woman to return home against her will. They refused to send a patrol car. Diane completely lost her composure. She knew the entire foundation of her wealthy, comfortable life was about to collapse. That night, She sent a frantic text message to her husband, Mark. The investigators eventually subpoenaed the phone records and found the exact message. Diane texted Mark, "If she talks, we lose everything." She was right. I was going to talk. And I was going to take back every single thing she stole from me. 2 weeks after the birthday party, we walked into the Fairfax family court. Laura had hired the best legal team she could find, completely funded by the savings she had built up over the last 2 decades. I wore a simple, clean suit that Laura had bought for me. My stomach was in knots. I had not seen Diane, Mark, or Ashley since the night I walked out of their house with my trash bag. When Diane walked into the courtroom, she looked exactly the same as she always did. She was perfectly composed, wearing an expensive tailored dress and carrying a designer handbag. She sat next to her very expensive defense attorney, looking completely unbothered by the fact that she was facing serious allegations of fraud and kidnapping. She still believed she was untouchable. She believed she could talk her way out of anything. When the judge asked Diane for her opening statement regarding the adoption dispute, Diane stood up, looked the judge directly in the eye, and played the victim perfectly. She gestured toward me with a look of fake sadness on her face. "I rescued her from the system," Diane claimed, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. She told the court that Laura was unfit, that I was a difficult child, and that she had sacrificed her own time and resources to give me a loving home. But her lies did not last long. We had Rachel, the private investigator, and our lead attorney ready to dismantle every single word Diane said. Our lawyer stood up and began presenting the mountain of evidence Rachel had spent months gathering. First, we submitted the official DNA test results. The paperwork proved with absolute certainty that Laura was my biological mother and that Diane had zero biological claim to me. Next, our lawyer brought up the original adoption paperwork from 21 years ago. He presented a forensic handwriting expert's report. The expert confirmed that the signature on the legal relinquishment document was completely forged. Laura had never signed her rights away. Diane had faked the signature while Laura was lying in a hospital bed attached to life support machines. Then, the lawyer brought out the financial documents. He projected the subsidy trail onto a large screen in the courtroom. On the left side of the screen were the records from the Virginia Adoption Assistance Program, showing the exact $1,020 monthly deposits hitting Diane's bank account. On the right side of the screen were Diane's bank statements. Our lawyer highlighted the outgoing tuition payments for Ashley's private school. The dates matched perfectly. The amounts lined up exactly. The atmosphere in the room immediately shifted. You could feel the tension dropping like a heavy weight. Even Diane's own lawyer looked deeply uncomfortable. Our team did not stop there. We called our next-door neighbor to the witness stand to testify about how I was treated. The neighbor told the judge, under oath, that she had seen me doing heavy manual labor in the yard for years while the rest of the family relaxed inside. We also presented the investigators' photos. Rachel had managed to get clear, undeniable photos of the furnace storage room. The judge stared at the images of the dirty, stained twin mattress on the concrete floor, surrounded by heavy machinery and plastic grocery bags. Mark was called to the stand next. Mark was a coward. He had spent his entire life letting Diane run the household and make all the decisions, and when faced with the reality of going to federal prison for financial fraud, he immediately turned on his wife. He shifted nervously in his suit, avoiding eye contact with Diane. Diane handled the adoption money, Mark testified, his voice shaking. He completely threw her under the bus, claiming he had absolutely no idea where the money for Ashley's expensive lifestyle was coming from. He swore he thought Diane was just good at budgeting his salary. Diane glared at him from the defense table, her face turning bright red with pure rage. Then it was Ashley's turn. My older foster sister walked up to the witness stand holding a tissue. She looked completely shattered. The confident, wealthy sorority girl I knew was gone. She was crying uncontrollably. Our lawyer asked Ashley if she knew I was paying rent to live in the basement. Ashley nodded, wiping her eyes. "Mom said Emily cost us money." Ashley sobbed into the microphone. She admitted that Diane had always complained about how much of a financial burden I was. But then, Ashley looked at the massive screens displaying the bank records. She looked at the clear proof that her expensive Jeep, her designer clothes, and her private school tuition were paid for by the government checks meant for my care. Ashley looked directly at me. Her voice cracked as she spoke her final words on the stand. I didn't know it was hers, she said. I actually believed her. Ashley was spoiled and cruel, but she was just another pawn in Diane's massive financial game. Finally, the judge turned his attention back to Diane. He was clearly furious. He looked down at the documents on his desk and then locked eyes with her. He pressed her hard on the financial discrepancies. He demanded to know why every single one of the government subsidy payments perfectly matched the outgoing payments for Ashley's luxury expenses. Diane could not handle the pressure. Her composed, wealthy suburban housewife act completely shattered. The realization that she was losing control over the narrative pushed her over the edge. She stood up from her chair, slamming her hands down on the defense table. She exploded. She was an investment. Diane screamed at the top of her lungs. The entire courtroom went dead silent. The judge stopped writing. The court reporter froze. Even Mark and Ashley looked at Diane in absolute horror. She had just admitted it out loud, on the official court record. She had just confessed that she stole a baby from a comatose woman purely to use that child as a reliable, monthly income stream. Tears streamed down my face. I sat there, looking at the woman who had forced me to scrub toilets and sleep next to a furnace for 2 decades. I finally found my voice. I was a child, I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence of the room. It was a nuclear courtroom moment. The raw truth of what she had done hung in the air, impossible to deny. Our lawyer gave me the floor. I stood up and looked directly at the judge. I did not yell. I did not scream like Diane did. I just spoke the plain, ugly truth. She didn't raise me, I told the court. She managed me. She invoiced my existence. My words hung in the air of the courtroom. She didn't raise me, I said clearly, making sure the court reporter caught every single syllable. She managed me. She invoiced my existence. The judge did not need to hear another word after that. He looked at Diane with absolute disgust. He organized the massive stack of financial evidence, the forged documents, and the photographs of my basement room. He delivered his ruling right then and there. He declared that the original adoption from 21 years ago was officially and permanently void. He stated that my legal rights as Laura Bennett's biological daughter were fully restored, erasing Diane's name from my life completely. But he did not stop with family law. He looked at the financial ledgers one last time and ordered Diane to pay exactly $257,040 in direct restitution. That was the exact amount of state subsidy money she had stolen and funneled into Ashley's lifestyle over the last 2 decades. Furthermore, the judge announced that he was submitting a formal fraud referral to the state prosecutor's office. Diane was not just going to lose her money and her reputation. She was going to face serious criminal charges for defrauding the Virginia Adoption Assistance Program. When the judge made that statement, Diane completely lost whatever shred of sanity she had left. She stood up, ignoring her expensive defense attorney who was desperately trying to pull her back down into her chair. Her face was twisted in rage. She pointed a shaking finger at me across the room and screamed, "I gave you everything." I looked at her. I did not feel scared of her anymore. She was just a desperate, greedy woman who had finally been caught. I simply replied, "You billed me." The bailiff ordered Diane to sit down and be quiet. The hearing was over. We had won. 20 minutes later, Laura and I were walking out of the heavy double doors of the Fairfax family court. The afternoon sun was bright, and the air felt incredibly clean. I took a deep breath, feeling a massive weight lift off my chest. But before we could reach Laura's Escalade, the doors behind us banged open. Diane marched out of the courthouse, her heels clicking aggressively on the concrete steps. She didn't have her lawyer with her this time. She walked right up to me, her eyes completely cold. "After everything I did for you," she started to say, her voice full of venom. I didn't let her finish her sentence. I cut her off immediately. "You did it for money," I said. I turned my back on her, got into my real mother's car, and we drove away. I never looked back at Diane again. 6 months have passed since that day in court. My life looks completely different now. I no longer live in Fairfax, and I definitely do not sleep in a furnace storage room. I live in a beautiful, quiet apartment in Richmond. The best part about my new bedroom is that it has 2 large windows. Every morning, I wake up to natural sunlight streaming across my bed. I don't keep my clothes in plastic grocery bags anymore. I have a real closet. I used the first portion of the restitution money Diane was forced to pay me to enroll in culinary school. For 10 years, I cooked meals for the Carter family because I was forced to, standing on a step stool just to reach the stove. Now I cook because I want to. I am learning how to create beautiful, complex dishes, and I am actually good at it. I also started going to therapy. It is hard work. Unpacking 21 years of being treated like a financial burden takes a lot of time, but I am slowly learning how to trust myself and how to accept that I deserve good things. My favorite part of my new life happens at the end of every week. Every Sunday, I drive over to Laura's house for dinner. We sit in her warm kitchen and talk about everything we missed out on. Laura insists on cooking the Sunday dinners herself. She is a genuinely terrible cook. She burns the chicken, overcooks the pasta, and forgets to season the vegetables, but she tries so hard. I sit at her table and eat every single bite with a smile on my face because it is the best food I have ever tasted. It is food made with actual love. I wanted to tell this story for a very specific reason. There are a lot of people out there who grew up feeling like they were just taking up space. If you are reading this and you grew up tolerated instead of loved, I need you to know the absolute truth. You were never the problem. The day the family court judge voided my adoption and ordered Diane to pay $257,040 in direct restitution, he also submitted a formal fraud referral to the state prosecutor's office. That referral did not just disappear into a filing cabinet. The state of Virginia takes it very seriously when someone steals hundreds of thousands of dollars from taxpayer-funded programs. I was already safely living in my new apartment in Richmond, focusing on culinary school and attending therapy, but back in Fairfax, Diane's comfortable life was rapidly coming to an end. For 21 years, Diane had collected a monthly envelope from the Virginia Adoption Assistance Program containing exactly $1,020. She had originally secured this money by filing false abandonment papers and forging my real mother's signature on a relinquishment document while Laura was lying in a hospital bed in a coma. Diane thought she had permanently sealed those records and buried the truth forever. But Rachel, the private investigator Laura hired, had uncovered the complete financial ledger of Diane's bank account. That ledger proved that Emily funded her sister's luxurious life. The exact dates the government subsidy hit Diane's account perfectly matched the dates she made massive tuition payments for Ashley's private school and the down payment for Ashley's brand new Jeep. 6 weeks after our victory in family court, the criminal consequences finally arrived at the Carter house. It was a Tuesday morning. 2 state police cruisers pulled into the wide, paved driveway of the Fairfax property. The next-door neighbor, the same woman who had testified in family court about seeing me do heavy manual labor in the yard for years, watched the entire scene unfold from her front porch. The police knocked on the front door. Mark opened it. During the family court trial, Mark had completely betrayed his wife on the witness stand, swearing under oath that Diane handled all the adoption money and claiming he had no idea where the extra cash came from. He was a coward then, and he was a coward when the police showed up. He immediately stepped aside and let the officers into the house. They arrested Diane in her own kitchen. They did not let her change out of her bathrobe. They placed her in handcuffs, walked her out the front door in broad daylight, and put her in the back of a police cruiser. For a woman who cared so deeply about her reputation and how she looked to her country club friends, being paraded out of her house in handcuffs was the ultimate humiliation. The state prosecutor charged Diane with multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and defrauding a state government agency. Because the total amount stolen was exactly $257,040, the charges were severe felonies. Diane was denied bail because the prosecutor argued she was a flight risk and had a proven history of forging legal documents. She was placed in the county jail to await her criminal trial. While Diane was sitting in a jail cell, the financial reality of the family court's restitution order hit Mark and Ashley. The judge had ordered Diane to pay me back every single dollar she had stolen. But Diane did not have $257,040 sitting in a checking account. She had spent all of it on Ashley's vacations, designer clothes, and sorority prep over the last 2 decades. Because Diane and Mark were legally married, the state began seizing their shared assets to fulfill the court-ordered restitution. Mark's wages were heavily garnished. The court placed a massive lien on the Fairfax house. Mark panicked. He realized that staying married to Diane meant he would go completely bankrupt trying to pay off the massive debt she owed me. 3 weeks after Diane was arrested, Mark filed for divorce. He did not visit her in jail to tell her. He simply had his lawyer serve her the divorce papers through the jail's visitation glass. Mark wanted to protect his own retirement funds and whatever was left of his salary. He packed up his personal belongings, abandoned the large house in Fairfax, and moved into a cheap, one-bedroom apartment closer to his office. He completely cut contact with Diane, leaving her to face the criminal justice system entirely alone. Ashley's life collapsed just as quickly. During the family court hearing, Ashley had cried on the witness stand and admitted that Diane always said I cost the money, but she claimed she did not know the money paying for her lifestyle actually belonged to me. Whether she knew or not, the money was officially gone. Without the $1,020 monthly subsidy, and with Mark's wages being garnished to pay my restitution, there was no money left for Ashley. The bank repossessed the brand new Jeep that Diane had bought for her using my state funds. Ashley could no longer afford her expensive private university tuition. She was forced to drop out of her sorority and leave the school entirely in the middle of the semester. Ashley had to move back into the empty Fairfax house, which was now in the early stages of foreclosure. For the first time in her life, she had to get a job. She applied at a local retail store, earning minimum wage. I remembered how I used to walk 2 miles in the snow and summer heat to work at a local diner because Diane kept my identification locked away and refused to let me have a car. Now, Ashley was the one walking to work, forced to face the harsh reality of earning her own money instead of living off the funds stolen from a foster child. The criminal trial for Diane was a completely different experience from the family court hearing. The state prosecutor had received the formal fraud referral from the family court judge and took the case extremely seriously. Diane was no longer just fighting over family law or sealed adoption records. She was fighting the state of Virginia for stealing taxpayer money. I was subpoenaed to testify again, but this time, the entire focus was on the financial crimes. I sat in the witness stand and explained exactly how I lived my life in that house. The prosecutor showed the jury the photographs of the furnace storage room, where I slept on a dirty twin mattress. They showed the jury the bank records proving Diane collected the $1,020 monthly subsidy from the Virginia Adoption Assistance Program for 21 years. Then, they showed how those exact government funds paid for Ashley's private school tuition, her expensive vacations, and her new Jeep. Diane's expensive defense attorney tried to argue that the state money simply went into a general household fund to benefit everyone, but the paper trail was too clear. The prosecutor brought out the printed email where Diane explicitly told Mark, "We can't lose her subsidy." That single sentence destroyed her entire defense. It proved her motive was entirely financial. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Diane guilty on multiple counts of wire fraud and theft of government funds. When the judge read the guilty verdict, Diane did not scream or explode like she did in family court. She just stared straight ahead, completely silent, finally realizing she had lost everything. The judge sentenced her to federal prison. She was handcuffed by the bailiffs and taken away immediately. There was no going back to her comfortable suburban life. While Diane started her prison sentence, I was busy building my real life. Exactly 6 months after the family court voided the adoption and restored my legal rights, my world looked completely different. The court had ordered Diane to pay me $257,040 in direct restitution, which was the exact amount she had stolen over 2 decades. The state liquidated her remaining assets to make sure I got that money. I did not waste a single dollar of it. I used it to secure a safe, permanent home. I moved into a beautiful apartment in Richmond. It is located on the second floor of a quiet, clean building. When I first walked into the apartment, the very first thing I noticed were the windows. My new bedroom has massive windows that face the east. Every single morning, I wake up to bright, warm sunlight filling the room. It is the exact opposite of the dark, cold basement I was forced to live in for my entire childhood. I bought a brand new bed with soft sheets. I bought a real dresser to hold my clothes, instead of keeping them in plastic grocery bags on a concrete floor. I finally have a space that is entirely mine, and I finally feel safe. With my living situation secured, I decided to take control of my future and my career. For my entire life, I was forced to cook dinner every single night for 4 people. I started when I was 11 years old, standing on a step stool just to reach the stove. Diane never thanked me. But despite the forced labor, I actually liked the process of preparing food. So, I used a portion of my restitution money to enroll in a professional culinary school. I attend classes 5 days a week. I am learning proper knife skills, advanced cooking techniques, and how to run a commercial kitchen. I am no longer just boiling pasta or frying chicken for a family that resents me. I am creating complex, beautiful dishes for myself. I also started going to therapy. Healing from 21 years of emotional abuse and financial exploitation does not happen overnight. I sit in a comfortable chair in my therapist's office once a week and talk about the anger and the deep betrayal. We talk about how Diane always made me feel like I was a massive financial burden, even though I was the one secretly funding her biological daughter's luxurious lifestyle. Therapy helps me process the fact that I was treated as an income stream instead of a human being. It is hard, exhausting work, but it is incredibly necessary. I am slowly learning how to set boundaries, how to value my own time, and how to stop apologizing for simply existing. The absolute best part of my new life happens at the end of every week. Every Sunday, I drive my own car to Laura's house for dinner. Laura is my real mother, and we share the exact same eyes and the exact same face. She missed out on 21 years of my life because of Diane's lies and forged documents. Now, we are making up for lost time. Laura completely insists on cooking the Sunday dinners herself. She wants to take care of me. The funny thing is, Laura cooks badly. She tries so incredibly hard, but she always manages to burn the edges of the chicken, overcook the rice, or forget to season the vegetables. I never complain. I sit at her kitchen table, watching her move around the kitchen, and I smile. I eat every single bite of the burnt food she puts in front of me. It is the greatest meal I have ever had because it is the first time in my entire life someone is cooking for me out of pure love. We talk about my culinary classes, her week at work, and our plans for the future. We do not talk about Diane or the Carter family. They are entirely in the past. I decided to share my story with the world because I know I am not the only one. There are thousands of kids out there stuck in homes where they are treated like a paycheck or a burden. If you are reading this and you grew up tolerated instead of loved, I want you to look at my life. I want you to see that the cruelty you faced is not your fault. If you grew up tolerated instead of loved, you need to know the absolute truth. You were never the problem. The people who failed you are the problem. I survived 21 years as a scapegoat, but now I am finally free. I want to tell you exactly what happened to my foster sister, Ashley. For 21 years, she lived a life of complete luxury, driving a Jeep, attending private school, receiving sorority prep, going on vacations, and wearing designer clothes. She was the golden child. At Diane's birthday party, Ashley was the one who proudly handed Diane an Apple Watch Ultra, while the guests clapped and cheered. She had no idea that her entire existence as a wealthy, privileged daughter was funded by a stolen government subsidy meant for me. During the family court trial, Ashley completely broke down. She sat on the witness stand, crying uncontrollably. She told the judge, "Mom said Emily cost us money." And then she looked at the bank records proving I was the one paying for her life, adding, "I didn't know it was hers." I actually believed her in that courtroom. She was cruel to me growing up, but she was also just a pawn in Diane's massive financial crime. However, believing her did not change the reality of her new situation. When the judge ordered Diane to pay $257,040 in direct restitution, the money flow completely stopped. Ashley's life collapsed overnight. Because the state seized Diane and Mark's assets to pay me back, Ashley lost everything. The bank repossessed her Jeep. She could no longer afford her private school tuition or her sorority fees. She was forced to drop out of her university completely in the middle of the semester. With her parents divorcing and the Fairfax house going into foreclosure, Ashley had to figure out how to survive on her own. For the first time in her life, she had to get a minimum wage job. She now works at a discount retail store. She spends her days folding cheap clothes and standing behind a cash register for 8 hours a shift. She does not take lavish vacations anymore. She takes the public bus to work because she no longer has a car. Sometimes, people from her old prep school or her former sorority come into the store. I heard she hides in the stockroom when she sees them, too embarrassed to let her old friends see how far she has fallen. She used to look down on me when I walked 2 miles to my diner job. Now, she is living the exact same struggle. She is finally learning what it means to actually work for a living instead of surviving on stolen money. She is no longer the princess of Fairfax. She is just another broke girl trying to make rent, dealing with the devastating consequences of her mother's greed. Ashley never knew how to be poor. For 21 years, she was handed everything: the Jeep, the expensive private school tuition, the sorority prep, and the designer clothes. When the judge voided my adoption and ordered Diane to pay back the $257,040 in restitution, the financial wall protecting Ashley completely shattered. She didn't just lose her cars and her clothes, she lost her entire identity. The reality of having no money hit her hardest when she tried to keep up with her old friends. She was no longer a student at her expensive university, but she still lived in the same city. She tried going to a local coffee shop where her former sorority sisters hung out. She wanted to pretend everything was normal. But when she got to the register, her debit card was declined. The bank had frozen the accounts. She had to stand there, completely humiliated, while the barista asked for another form of payment. Her former friends just watched from their table, whispering to each other. Nobody offered to pay for her. She had to move out of the Fairfax area completely. She rented a tiny, rundown room in a shared apartment with 3 strangers. The bathroom she uses now is moldy, and the hot water barely works. I remember how she used to purposely leave wet towels and toothpaste all over her pristine bathroom back at the Carter house, knowing I would be the one forced to scrub it clean. Now, she spends her days scrubbing other people's messes. Without a college degree or any real-world skills, the only job she could get was as a housekeeper at a cheap roadside motel. Every day, she pushes a heavy cleaning cart down dimly lit hallways, making minimum wage. She changes dirty bedsheets, scrubs toilets, and empties trash cans for strangers. Her hands, which used to wear expensive jewelry, are now dry and cracked from cheap cleaning chemicals. She doesn't have Diane to run to anymore, and Mark completely cut her off when he moved out to protect his own salary. She is completely alone. Sometimes, when she is walking to the bus stop in the freezing rain after a grueling 8-hour shift, I wonder if she thinks about me. I wonder if she finally understands what it felt like to be treated like the dirt on the bottom of someone's shoe. She built her entire life on the money Diane stole from my existence, and now, the universe has forced her to pay the exact same price. To anyone listening to this who grew up feeling like they were just taking up space, if you were made to feel like a financial burden, an obligation, or even an investment by the very people who were supposed to protect you, please listen to me carefully. You were never the problem. You were just a child. Sometimes, the most profound betrayals happen behind the closed doors of picture-perfect suburban homes, where love is entirely conditional and your very existence is invoiced and managed. Emily's story is a heartbreaking reminder that toxic people will build their luxurious lives on your back and then demand that you thank them for it. But her victory proves something even more important. You do not have to spend your life paying off a debt you never actually owed. You have the power to walk away, reclaim your stolen identity, and find the people who will cherish you, the ones who will make you burnt Sunday dinners just because they love having you at their table. Remember, you deserve to be celebrated, not just tolerated. Thank you for watching this incredible journey of survival, heartbreak, and ultimate justice here on Family Drama Stories. Family is supposed to be our safe haven, but as we saw today, it can sometimes be the source of our deepest wounds. If Emily's story resonated with you, or if you have survived a toxic family dynamic, narcissism, or manipulation of your own, please share your truth in the comments section below. We read every single comment, and this community is a safe space for your voice to finally be heard. If you want to support the channel and help us expose more dark family secrets, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who might need this exact message today. Most importantly, subscribe to Family Drama Stories and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming deep dives into the unbelievable, shocking, and empowering realities of complicated families. Until next time, stay strong, protect your peace, and never forget your true worth.